Okay, good evening and welcome to the Writing Presenting Literature Review. Writing and presenting a literature review. Really, it's more writing a literature review. But either way, I am Dr. Presley Rankin, and I'm going to be going over this part of the residency review with you. These pre-reviews are giving you a chance to learn some information without having to sit through us lecturing to you the whole time you are coming for residency. So welcome. Um, Try not to let my camera make you a little bit woozy. Sometimes it lags, so I'll move really slowly in kind of a weird way, but just ignore me down there in the corner if you want to. Okay, so the first thing we're talking about is what is a literature review? I mean, a lot of people have many different views on literature reviews. They can be considered a type of research, honestly. It's just research of things that have already been done. It's not original research. However, the way you put it together in some ways does create a new and original thing because you are taking the literature on your topic and putting it together in a way that makes your topic seem important. It makes your topic relevant. It ties in different ideas that maybe people haven't tied together before. And it sets the groundwork, the framework for your study. You're going to go over in a literature review the background of your topic. You're going to connect it to relevant areas of literature. You're going to show that no one else has researched this. And you're going to show that there's a need for the research. You're going to need to show that what you're doing is important to the research community. That's really something that you need to do. Typically, literature review it's basically an introduction, the body of the literature review, and then conclusions or summaries. It's really that simple. How you put a literature review together, though, there are hundreds and hundreds of different methods, but typically you see three that are the most common, and that's chronological, which is like a historical literature review where you go over the literature over the period of time. Thematic, which is probably the most common, and the literature review is structured around three or more themes, and these are basically bodies of literature that relate to your topic and frame your topic. And I'll show you the Venn diagram in a minute. That's thematic. And then methodological, you don't see this very often, but basically methodological kind of showcases what different methodologies have found. You may do this if you're doing, for example, a study you're going to do a qualitative study in a field that they've only done quantitative work in before, or only quantum mixed methods, and there's very little qualitative, so you may want to set it up to show here's what they've done already, but it's inadequate, and this is why I need to do my study. So I'm sure you've seen the funnel concept before. The literature review is going to kind of funnel down to your specific study area. By the end of the literature review, you, the reader, me, the reader, should be like, oh, yeah, that's why you need to do this study. That's what it is. Okay, perfect. That should be where I am at the end of your literature review. I couldn't get my literature review done until I conceptualized it as an argument. In my mind, I was making an argument to do my study. Why is it important? Why should I do this study? I was arguing in my defense, or I was debating with the reader to show them why it was important. But either way, you're often going to be funneling down from the broader to the subtopics to looking really more specifically at studies that are similar to what you want to do or inform what you want to do. Now, if you do a thematic dissertation, you may funnel down in each of the themes, but then there'll be a summary of all of the little bottom parts of the funnel that will kind of put together all of your conclusions or all of your ideas into one place. And one of the things you're going to find out in the academic writing video is that we're really focusing on adding context. And the reason for this is because the reader needs to be able to understand why you're presenting the literature you do. The reader also needs to see your ideas, where you're coming from, the direction you're moving in. We don't want our dissertations to look like, citation, 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 citation. We also don't want students to do what they do sometimes in their papers and are like, I need an article that says the sky is green. And you go and look up the research and you find one article written in Taiwan in 1922 that says the sky is green, and you're like, oh, that's it, sky's green, quote, citation. The problem with that is that article may not be relevant, it may have been dismissed, it may have been a one-off, it could be fake, it could be wrong, it could have all kinds of problems with it. You don't provide the context to let us know where it comes from, then as the reader, there's no way to judge whether or not it's important in the field. You should be telling us this, giving us this information in the literature review. So that's where the context piece comes from. Now, the three-circle idea is really how you can come to grips with your literature, how you can kind of figure out what it is you want to do. The idea is that you think of, and you could have a 4 actually circle diagram. You could have a 2, but that's probably not going to be the best. But you think about your topic, and then you think, what are the important points of my topic? So say I want to study women who are CEOs of companies and who practice transformational leadership. And that's never been studied before. They've studied, women, they've studied CEOs, maybe they've studied women CEOs, maybe they've studied women in leadership, but the combination of that has not been done before. The literature I'm going to pull in and write about in my literature review is this, didn't mean to move it. This area right here in the middle. These areas in the middle between leadership and CEOs, CEOs and women, and leadership and women, these areas I'm going to find academic articles on. Somebody has written about CEOs that are women. Someone has studied women's leadership. Someone has studied how CEOs typically lead. Those 3 overlapping areas, that's where I'm going to be pulling articles from. Now, if I can't find a lot of articles, say, for example, on women CEOs, I may have to pull into women just in general, or pull into CEOs in general to find more research to fill out this area. But in the end, I'm going to show that no one has studied this little spot right here in the middle. No one has studied this empty space of women CEOs and how they lead. No one has studied that. I'm going to study it. That is the essence of what your literature review does. It takes these 3 areas, shows how they connect together, shows how they connect to your topic, and shows that there's a hole in the middle that you're going to study. When you're writing a literature review, you're going to be doing a lot of editing, and we're going to try to we're going to oversell this during the residency. Revision, revision, revision. You're going to hear that a lot. Revision, revision, revision. The academic writing for publication, which is what you'll be doing with your dissertation, is really a lot of revision. If you publish an article in a journal, you're going to get people, a committee of reviewers and editors who are going to review your work and give you feedback. You're going to have to revise it. They're going to say it's still not good enough. You're going to have to revise it again. It's the academic way. It's how it works. It's the same thing if you try to publish a book, even if it's not an academic book. You're going to have editors that are going to come in and they're going to say, no, I don't like this. You need to change it. They're not going to tell you how to change it. They're not going to give you the exact words to say. They're going to say, chapter 3 is a bit slow. Make it a little bit more interesting. What does that even mean? You're going to find those moments in your literature review and writing your literature review up where your chair is going to say, this is not flowing. And you're going to be like, well, what does that mean? And what it means is you've read all these articles. You have them all in your head. So if there's disjointed areas, if you're changing subjects too quickly, you've in your mind fill in the gaps. Your chair, your reader, they haven't read all the articles. They can't fill in the gaps. What they're seeing is you're jumping from subject to subject, and they have no idea why these subjects are tied together. That means you haven't done a good job in writing up your literature review. You need to go back and you need to think more about the themes, the story. What are you trying to say? What are you trying to tell? Now remember, a literature review is going to be mostly literature from your research. It's not going to be a place for you to put your opinions. However, your voice is still important, and we need to know, why are you leading us down this road? You're going to explain that you're going to take us into this next area of literature and why you're taking us there. But that's not opinion, that's just you telling us what's going on. You're not going to say this is better, this is worse, this is the best. You don't give your opinion, but you do guide the reader. I like to say that the voice of the author in an academic work is as a guide. You're guiding the reader through. But you're going to have revision. Your chair is going to ask you to revise. Your committee is going to ask you to revise. You're going to have revision. So expect it. Be ready for it. Accept it, listen to it, and work as hard as you can to get it done. Your chair may say, take it out. Take something out of this. It doesn't make sense. You take it out, but then later you change another area, and then suddenly it makes sense to have that back in again. Don't be frustrated. It's just the nature of a living document. Small changes, even the change of one word, could change the thematic meaning of what you're doing, and maybe more is needed or maybe less is needed. Changing it again could mean more is needed again. It's the nature of the beast. So one of the tips I like to give, or we like to give here at CityU to students, is make sure you're showing other people your work. There's nothing better than to get a friend or your spouse or even your children to read what you're writing and see how they respond to it. Do they understand what you're saying? Does it make sense to them? Did it feel complete? Did it feel there was something they were missing? Did they not understand suddenly that you've used so many acronyms that they got confused as to what you were talking about, because you've now used 20 different acronyms, and you're down the list and they're like, I don't even know what SCC means. I forgot. And then they have to go back up and read to try to find out where you told them what it was. You're going to need to explain things clearly. If you have a very heavily acronym oriented field of study, like teaching often does, there's 100 different organizations and tests, and they all have a 3-letter, 4-letter initials. You're going to need to write it out every so often. Even if you've explained what the acronym means, you're going to need to rewrite it out again 2 pages later. The reader isn't going to remember back that far, especially if there's a lot of different ones to remember. So just remember, you're the expert, but the reader isn't always the expert. You're trying to make them more of an expert, but you've got to guide them along. The other thing a literature review does is contextually situates the research in a way that makes sense from your point of view. So you tell the readers what authors are similar, where they agree, where they disagree. You want to cover, if someone's reading your literature review and they're an expert in the field, and they see you saying the sky is blue, and you have all these references for the sky being blue, but they know about a study that said all of these other blue studies are wrong. The sky is actually purple. And they have a study to prove that. This expert's going to say, well, you ignored this new study that has come along to say the sky is purple. Well, maybe you meant to ignore it. Maybe you think it's wrong. Maybe you've decided that you're only going to focus on the blueness of the sky and not really focus on other colors. You need to explain that in your literature review. Author A disagrees with authors A, B, C, or B, C, D, and E, but the reasoning, their study is flawed, or their study is new, or that is not the focus of this study. Therefore, we're going to not, use that article or not pay attention to what they're saying. Whatever you have to explain or however you explain it, you want to do it in a way that makes the reader understand, okay, well, you saw the article, but you're not going to use it. And why? A good literature review is focused, concise, logical, developed, integrative, and current. This is why these aren't City U ideals. These are exemplary dissertation rubric ideals. This is what you're judged on if you submit your dissertation for an award. So keep that in mind. Understand that when we say you can only use references for 80% of your work has to be within the last 5 years, that's because we want you to be current. When we say that you want to have a flow to your writing, when we say that you need to add more literature, you need to develop an idea more, it's to fit these ideals. The biggest one that you'll see is the first two, focused and concise. The biggest two that you'll see are focused and concise. We want you to have all the things that you need to have, but it doesn't mean you need to tell us a whole paragraph to express one point that needs to be expressed. You're not getting paid to pad your literature review. Your literature review needs to be concise, only the facts. Just tell us the facts. Okay, so pitfalls, common problems. Vagueness, limited range, insufficient information, irrelevant material, omission of contrasting views, omission of recent work. These are huge pitfalls that students always go down because they don't want to deal with contrasting points of view, or they feel like they've explained something enough, even though the reader, the chair, the committee doesn't feel like it's enough because it's too vague. Or too much information, irrelevant information. I don't need to know the entire history of paper for you to talk about manufacturing vulcanized rubber paper in the 21st century. I don't need to know the whole history. Give me highlights, paper development, major paper developments over the years. You don't need to start with the first paper and go all the way to the end. Just give me the highlights. But then focus deeply on the important part, which is the part you're covering. One way in order to help you do this is to create a summary table. A summary table takes your literature and puts it into columns so that you can figure out themes and you can see how it relates, and you can kind of design how you want your literature review to flow. And it looks something like this. You have the articles. The articles are put together by themes. Information from the article is included that is important. So what was the sample? Who did they study? What was the environment, or what area did they study in? What methodology did they use? And then what were their conclusions? What were the basic things that they found from their study? If you fill out a table like this, let me just hide this really quick to show you the bottom of the table. If you fill out a table like this, you can refer back to it over and over and over and over again as you're doing your dissertation. It also helps you to provide context. That being said, that's not what I did. It seemed too tedious for me. I used a citation manager. So I used Zotero, which is a free citation management software system. And I copied my references into Zotero, so it was a reference manager. It held the references, it held the citations. It automatically could generate a reference table for me if I wanted to. But it had the most important thing of all, which was a notes section. And in the notes section, I just cut and pasted from the PDF into the notes the parts that I thought were important, a whole paragraphs, or even just one sentence. Cut it and paste them into the notes, saved them. Then what was important was I just did a search. So I'm writing my literature review, I'm writing about mentorship. I remember, I should include something about psychology and boundaries in mentor relationships. I know I read an article about boundaries and mentorship. I go to my search engine, I say boundaries and mentorship. Bam. All the articles I read that had that information in them come up. And then I can go to the notes and immediately see it and either paraphrase it or quote it, whatever I needed to do, because the actual words are right there. It was huge for me. But one of the things I liked about Zotero is it didn't automatically insert things into the Word document. Don't do that. Let me tell you why. Because those artificial creations will mess up the flow and style of your dissertation. It can put garbage into your code, into the Word document, that is impossible sometimes to get out. It's great that you could easily click on a reference, delete it, and it will delete all the citations from your work. That's a wonderful thing. I get it. It's great that you can know where your citations are by clicking on one thing and seeing a report of where they are in the document. That's great too. But here's the deal. You've got to do this yourself. You've got to manually be able to check your document and match your citations to your references. You need to be able to insert the references in and know that they're formatted correctly, because garbage in, garbage out. The automatics downloads from the websites that you get when you click on cite this, download it. Boom, it downloads automatically. Sometimes it has things wrong. Sometimes it has things spelled out in the wrong place. There are mistakes made. You need to be able to check it. You're going to have to do a manual check. What does this mean? This means you are going to have an APA manual. Have it, buy it, keep it, use it. Tag it with little thumb tags that tells you everything that you look up regularly so that you can go back and look again. How do you format a table? How do you do a figure? How do you reference a book? How do you reference a journal article? Have little tabs and go back and refer to them so that you go through it and you know that it's right. And then the 80% rule. 80% of your citations have to be within the last 5 years. That's not counting the year you're in. So for 2018, it would be 17, 16, 15, 14, 13. So from 2013 to 2018, you can cite any of that. 80% has to be that. That's what makes you current, as we talked about earlier. Now, here's two different types of citations. You have the information prominent citation, and you have the author prominent citation. In order to provide context the way we want context provided at CityU, you need to use author prominent citations. You want to provide the context. Information prominent citations are really more for the harder sciences, for when you are adding information to something you've already introduced. We require at CityU for you to introduce the author the first time they're used. Then you could use an information citation later. But it adds to the readability, and we really want our dissertations to be readable. So you can see in the first one, it's just information with a citation. The second one, you have the author in the sentence. It's an in-sentence citation. And we say, a seminal author in the field of physics, to tell me the context. Who is this person? Why am I mentioning them? Now, if you have several authors, you still want to introduce the context. What's the theme that holds these authors together, even if you're using them at the end of the sentence? Several authors who have studied online testing have suggested that automated testing should be more readily accepted. Boom, boom, boom. These are the authors. Author prominent citation should be the bulk of your citations, at least the first time you mention an author, the first time you mention a work. Then later on in the paragraph or in another paragraph, you can do information prominent citations because you've already introduced the author, so keep that in mind. Active or passive voice. We have another rule here at CityU where we need you to use third person. That can be really problematic when you're trying to talk about your study, because you also can't anthropomorphize. You can't say the study will examine. Studies can't examine. Humans examine, the author examines, you will examine, but the study can't examine. So you're going to have to go into third person more than you would want to, but it's the only compromise. You've got to pull out that first person, and you can't use the researcher or the author. You need to be able to change it around. You're going to have to go to third person. It's just the way it is. Reporting verbs. We do not want to see the author said 100 times. We do not want to see the author found, the author discovered 100 times. We need a variety of reporting verbs. The author supported, the author suggested, the author proved, the author observed, the author argued, the author asserted. Use a variety of words throughout your document. It makes it more readable, and it also helps for your general audience to feel that you're not somebody that only knows one word for what authors do. Remember that verbs, research is always reported in the past tense. Even if somebody is researching it now, but they presented a study of what they had done so far, it's researched. That is the way it is. Research is always past tense. Now, you may also run into a case where you want to do present perfect tense. Several studies have provided, many studies have been conducted. You're going to need to probably do this when you're using multiple authors, and that's acceptable, even though it's present, it's really past tense. It's present perfect. It's a fancy tense that you can use. Some common errors in literature reviewing the literature. Hurrying. Trying to get finished as quick as you can means that you probably haven't researched enough. You probably haven't read enough articles to know what's really going on in the field. You can't write a literature review with 10 articles. A typical dissertation is going to have 100 to 200 articles cited. Those articles are all cited in your literature review. You're going to want to make sure that you've read really well within the field. You don't want to be relying on secondary sources, people who are reporting the work of other people. You don't want to use literature review articles where they just review all the literature. You don't want to use other people's opinions about things. You want to try to use the actual findings from studies in your discussion. Not so much what the author said in their literature review that they did for their article. That's a secondary source. They've read the material. Now they're telling you about what they read. You want to look at what the actual findings from these authors were. Concentrating too much on the findings rather than methods. You do want to know what the authors did in their studies. When you're looking at these studies, you want to be able to provide context. You're going to need to know what they did, how they did it, and be critical of that. Overlooking other sources. So academic journals are the primary source you should use. Don't want to use other sources unless your dissertation is going to be the type of dissertation that needs current information that will not have been studied. If you're a business student and you're studying a field of business, you may find that Forbes or Time Magazine may have some important articles to bring into what you're talking about. Just remember, though, that a reporter writing about what they saw someone else do is a secondary source. You don't want to use that as much, except if you have to, if you need to document something. But that needs to be very slim, very slender. Just keep in mind the pantheon of academics. Academic journal articles are the highest source. Under those, then you have books. Books are really not peer-reviewed. The editor reviews them, but not a group of peers like an academic journal article. Below books, then you have maybe research things like encyclopedias, then you have dissertations, and then you have magazines, blogs, the whole other ballgame. There's a time when those can be used, but just want to use them sparingly, and you need to be critical. Your chair might ask you, why are you using a magazine? You need to know. Searching too broad or too narrow of a topic, your chair is going to keep you away from that. They're going to keep you moving along. An inaccuracy, don't put words in the author's mouth. Don't string together a bunch of authors who shouldn't be stringed together because they didn't all agree. They didn't all say the same thing. Don't be packing them on there just to have a more impressive reference. Okay, reach the 30-minute mark. Write down your questions. We're going to have plenty of time to discuss these during our workshops and conference sessions. So come with questions. Come with your thoughts, your ideas, what you want to know. Keep that open mind. Keep that researcher mind. And I look forward to seeing you soon, or seeing you virtually soon.